Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're recording this one in the daytime.
It's weird.
Looks a little bit different, right? Brandon's still orange. No one can help that. It's just he ate too many oranges.
Wait a minute. I'm not usually this orange. It's just I think the warm lights that I use are a little bit warmer in this current climate for some reason. And I can't be bothered to make them cooler, so deal with it, I guess.
Yep.
It's my spray tan.
Yeah, it's summer. You're just getting ready. That's all it is.
It is spring, sir. You are jumping ahead.
I am. I'm just getting excited.
It's like barely spring. We just got here.
I'm manifesting it, okay? I'm just manifesting summer. I'm ready for it. That's when COVID will be over, hopefully, fingers crossed. And we'll all be able to do whatever it is we do. Anyways, so let's jump into 10 takes for the weekend. And my first one is going to be going back to the Gostisbehere situation. So he cleared waivers, and it really does seem that it was because of the cap situation and also his term. But more than anything, that flat cap seems to really affect teams. Because, I mean, it's shocking to me that Ghost cleared waivers. He's not that bad.
He's not.
But clearly
he's
the
a lot
reason
better than people give him credit for, I think. But
yeah. And another thing I wanted to say about the Ghost thing is a lot of people were like, oh, the Rangers got to pick up Ghost, or the Red Wings got to pick up Ghost because they don't have good players. The thing that a lot of people, I think, tend to forget when they're thinking about getting new players onto your team is that you're not just adding cap, you're also adding someone in front of your young players that are coming up that they need to jump over. So you're adding a hurdle to good players that you may want to have a roster spot for. So, for example, for the Rangers, they have Niels Lundqvist coming up probably next year, and they've also got a few other really good defensemen. It's tough to have some guy that you probably isn't in your long-term plans holding down a spot that's in the way of everybody else. And yet, I say that about a team that has Jack Johnson and Brendan Smith on their roster. So, what do I know?
You know who?
But anyways,
who could have used a power play one quarterback with roughly his cap?
The Isles,
the Flyers. I mean,
yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's just true. It's just true. Oh my God,
it's the truth. Wow, how you massacred them. Damn.
My goodness.
Oh boy. So second take here. Yours.
Yeah.
A little contentious. Let's do it.
So my second take is just about vetoes in general, and I think there was some discussions on Twitter which I think turned into a pretty good debate, but when it comes down to it, didn't really wind up with any answers. And I think when it comes to vetoes in general, that's what you're going to find is that the kind of de facto standard answer for a veto is if it's not like kind of provable collusion, or like it seems like they're taking advantage of a new player or something, you let the vast majority of trades go through. But we are now sitting right near the beginning of playoffs. And a question came up on Twitter asking about what looked very much like collusion to basically anybody that was looking at it. But to me in particular, a out of the playoffs team was trading Jordan Staal trading Mika Zibanejad to a second place team for Jordan Staal. So Jordan Staal going to the lower place team, Zibanejad going to the higher place team. And my response was just veto trades for teams that are out of the playoffs, statistically out of the playoffs, towards playoff contenders. And that drew unsurprising. I actually don't know why. I didn't think this was going to be controversial, but of course, drew quite a bit of controversy and turned into a discussion about like what should be done with the vetoes and what their purpose is and how do you handle being knocked out of the playoffs and all that kind of thing. And I've really thought about it quite a lot, and I still basically stand by what I said for the most part. I think if you have like a league of friends that you know and trust and like no funny business is going on, then like kind of whatever. But anytime I'm in a league where a team that's statistically out of the playoffs before the deadline, that's the key thing here. If you're statistically knocked out before the deadline, you're not just like a not so good team. You are like you're either the worst or very near the worst team in the league. And even then, sometimes in that situation, you're still not knocked out by the trade deadline. So to know that this team literally cannot make the playoffs by the trade deadline is an unusual circumstance. So let's just point that out first. It usually means the team's inactive, to be honest. And in those cases, it shouldn't even be a question that you veto a trade. If a team's been inactive all season, isn't making pickups, isn't setting lines, and suddenly they make a trade right around the playoffs, like, even if that trade looks good, I'm not accepting it, honestly. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, if everybody in the league, despite their position in the league, plays as if they're going to make the playoffs and sets their lines every week and like is at least semi-active, has made a couple ad drops here and there, then I get it. You can open the doors a little bit for some trades, but I feel like the cons outweigh the pros. And when you let those types of trades in, that's when you start having, everybody who did not trade with said team for an upgrade being like, what is happening here? Is this collusion? And then you have to deal with that. And even if it's not, it's just weird. So yeah, I feel like this hasn't really answered a lot of questions for anybody that is thinking about how to handle these things. But in my experience, commissioning 10 leagues a year usually or more, I'm pretty anti these types of trades, including to trades of my own teams. I had somebody that come to me with a trade that like looked okay, but I would be essentially the one gambling, trading a high floor guy for a high ceiling guy. But my team was out. And though I'm still, actively managing my roster, I don't want to finish last and all that. I also don't want to make a big effect on a competition I'm literally not a part of at this point. Like what I'm competing for and what the team I'm trading with are competing for are not the same thing anymore. And that it kind of feels like an integrity issue to me. That's the big deal. I'm so far out of the playoffs that team anyway, is so far out of the playoffs that I'm playing for fun at that point as opposed to for the win or for playoffs or for anything else. And it doesn't seem right. And when you think about what a trade deadline is, right? The trade deadline exists solely, even in real sports, solely the only reason a deadline exists is to protect the integrity of the competition for the teams that are doing well. There really isn't anything else. So it's the reason we have them in fantasy leagues is the same. As you get closer and closer to the playoffs, more and more teams get statistically eliminated, and then you start winding up with funny trades because what do they care? And it kind of turns into a different game at that point. And of course, in actual sports leagues, they're not necessarily trying to protect the integrity of the league. They're trying to protect, very hot players that are going to be traded at the very last second right before the playoffs for some big return and like totally change the scope of what the playoffs were looking like at the very end. But we're essentially trying to solve the same problem here, and that's what a trade deadline is. I'm basically trying to make that same protection a little bit ahead of time in the cases where it's relevant. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should do it this way, but if I start seeing trades like Jordan Stahl going for Mika Zibanejad, like that team is done. There's no way I'm letting that team trade that's already statistically eliminated when they're making these like insane trades to contending teams. It just isn't worth it. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, I'm hoping that, some of the other people on this topic, I know that I had a discussion with TJ, I think it was TJ from Fivehole, whoever was running Fivehole Fantasy Hockey's Twitter account at the time, was going back and forth with me. I'm pretty sure it was TJ, because I actually have seen his take on vetoes before. I think it would be interesting for, a group of us that kind of produce content and give you our takes like we are right now on these subjects to just come together sometime, maybe this offseason, and just talk about what vetoes mean and what collusion is and what you can really do about it and how to handle things as they get closer to the playoffs, because as they get closer to the playoffs, it's more likely you start seeing these crazy trades because teams don't care anymore or whatever. So
yeah,
that's it. I think that's, I spent almost 10 minutes babbling about vetoes and basically landed where I started. But if you see my auto veto take floating around somewhere, just know it's not from me being like iron fisted commissioner. I don't think I've blocked a single trade in any of the listener leagues, but it's just about what I think integrity means in a redraft league with people you don't know so well. That's really what it is.
And I think to kind of clarify, I think something too is like keepers are different.
Yeah, keepers and dynasties is a different thing. But
keeper and dynasty is a different beast.
In the same vein, that is still why the trade deadline exists. So
yeah,
but that doesn't mean you need to extend it forward. It's just in redraft leagues. Redraft leagues are very specific.
Yeah, and I think that there's also kind of a case of if someone has like a consolation bracket, maybe then you're a little bit exempt from that, auto veto if you're out of the playoffs type thing because everyone's playing for something. So that's a little bit different as well. But I think in the majority of cases, in most redraft leagues, when a team is statistically eliminated, if you're statistically eliminated, you're playing to be a good sport at that point.
Yeah.
Because if you don't play, if you stop setting lines, you think you're going to get invited next year? Absolutely not. And so you're playing for fun, but also because be a good sport, you're losing. You didn't do that well. It is what it is. Just keep playing. The Sabres are still playing.
What I will say about the
Sabres are still
the
there.
vast majority of teams that wind up in this position, it is extremely rare for me to see a team that was actively managed be in this position. It's almost always teams that have been inactive for long stretches. The only teams that are active that wind up in this position are usually destroyed by injuries. And at that point, sure, I guess, but still. In consolation brackets, that does... There are ways to... But again, that kind of precludes it being with people you don't know so well, usually. And in those cases, even then, it's not... I'm not saying auto veto, but the closer you get to the deadline, the closer you get to teams being eliminated statistically, the more you have to look at trades with just a little bit more scrutiny, and maybe not let the one that was like, that seems lopsided, but it's not collusion maybe, so it should go. I don't know if I let that go anymore.
It's just, I think it's less of a veto thing too. I think the issue becomes, I think it should be less of a veto thing and more just kind of a rule.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of leagues, it is more like just a gentleman's rule, right?
Yeah, I never attempt to trade with
trade
very deep, out of the playoff teams. Ever.
Yeah, don't trade with people out of the playoffs. I mean, I'm in a few leagues, and in some of them, that's the rule. It's just kind of like, look, don't trade with teams out of the playoffs, especially if you're towards the top, right? I mean, because that's the easiest thing. The first place team goes and targets the last place team. The last place team doesn't care, accepts the trade, and of course, it's not collusion. But I mean, that's not fair. It's not fair that the first place team can just go, essentially bum hunt that last place team and take whatever's on there. That's not right. From an integrity standpoint, that's not how the game is played. It's not fair. So, yeah, I think my advice would be never get to the veto point. Just tell your leagues don't trade with teams out of the playoffs. Unless, of course, like I said, those exemptions of Dynasty, Keeper, Consolation, or whatever. Yeah. Those weird ones. But for the vast majority...
Yeah, it mostly goes for leagues where you don't know everybody super well.
Yeah.
And
money leagues. If I know people...
money leagues, definitely.
And money leagues. If I'm with people that I know and they allow that, I'd be pissed.
Yeah,
because that's just not fair.
Yeah,
it's not a fair play.
Especially as the stakes go up. In fact, many high stakes leagues don't allow trades. So, and it's because of this reason.
Yeah,
I would know what's going on.
Yeah, so my advice is just, I think, nip it in the butt from the get go when you make leagues. As you get closer to the deadline, just kind of all agree not to trade with teams out of the playoffs. And it'll make things a hell of a lot easier, and you'll never get into this situation of having to veto a trade because you don't know where it stands, because you don't know what it means, and then other people cry foul. It's not a good time. So with that being said, moving on to the third take here, the McDavid fine. Did you think that should have been a suspension?
Man. I watched it at full speed. I watched the still frame. I watched it in slow motion. I've watched it from a different angle. I find it hard to believe the multitude of accounts and people, especially on Twitter, that have seen that have said it wasn't headhunting.
I don't understand.
How could it not be? Even if he managed to make coincidental contact, and that is what it would have been if it was shoulder first. He was not going for the shoulder. I mean, his body motion was clearly, he was mad. He was mad because of the game. He took it out on what was it, Kotkaniemi? Yeah. So, and then people want to be like, oh, well, he didn't go to the dark room for a concussion, so it couldn't have been a head. It's like, what does that mean?
How ridiculous?
How many players haven't done that? How many players have visibly gotten concussions and not gone to the dark room?
Also, player safety. Don't you love that we've gotten to this stage of player safety where the way we protect the player is we don't suspend someone unless they essentially put a player out of the game?
Yeah.
I think it's so ridiculous that suspensions are reliant on.
For what it's worth, I think it's dumb.
I
don't think it's even a tinfoil hat theory in this case. I do think he didn't get suspended because he is Connor McDavid.
Oh yeah, of course.
But
of course. And I think you also tank the Oilers' chances of the playoffs. I mean, tinfoil hat there. I don't think it has that much to do with the playoffs, but just it's Connor McDavid.
Take their chances at first anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. I mean, I think it should have been suspension. I think it's a suspension for pretty much everybody else in the league. They do that, and it's suspension. It's open ice, away from the puck. I don't know what
late
else you do with that. Late, I don't know. Clearly, like going I think it's suspension. Was pretty wild to see.
Yeah.
It wasn't, to be fair though, it wasn't as bad as McKinnon throwing his helmet at Connor Garland. I mean, that was vicious.
Yeah.
That was vicious.
Although I mean, I when I saw that, I couldn't help but be like, "What the?" Just like, what is this? What is happening?
I loved it. I loved it. I thought that was funny.
It didn't hurt Garland as bad as it looked like it did. It's just Garland's reaction to it looked like he got shot with a cannon.
It reminded me of like when you play games with your brother or sister as a kid, and you just get mad and you just throw the ball in their face.
But if you watch his reaction, what made it look like it blew his face off was he wasn't looking at McKinnon at all. He turns at the last second and basically makes the reaction you make when like a ball is about to hit you, and he just kind of shuffled his chest up and his head back, and that's why his like hair whipped and he looked like he got like blown up. But I don't think it was nearly as bad as it actually looked. But it was still just like, what are you doing? What is happening?
Maybe McKinnon is just that strong.
It was, yeah. It was, man. I would be surprised if that doesn't turn into a meme.
Yeah.
Anyway, superstars doing bad things. That should be this segment. Okay, Buffalo won. They won against Philly.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I called them to win against Philly the first game, and they were up 3-0. I'm like, I've done it. And then, of course, they managed to lose. But then they won the next time, and I think it can't be understated how important Ullmark is to that team. You know, and like you could kind of give like a subtle nod to Hutton, I guess, in that he was an upgrade to Johansson or anybody else they had in net, Tokarski, whatever. But Ullmark is definitely. Good Lord. At least he makes them like, you're not totally grimacing every time they're doing something on the ice now. But.
So I just want to go back really quick to this because this actually just dropped 20 minutes ago. Chandler Stevenson got suspended 3 games for elbowing Tobias Bjornfurt.
Because it caused an injury,
I don't think that play was that.
Yeah.
I don't think that play was that different from McDavid's though.
Cause an injury.
Sure, it ended. It ended differently. The wheel of the Department of Player Safety has spun, and it landed on this player is not Connor McDavid. Is essentially what happened.
I think Stevenson does not have a history. I think so.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't have one either.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really even have much of a history.
He doesn't have a history period.
General, so he
was only built 3 days ago. Nobody even knows who he is.
They put together the last pieces of his parts. His robot body. Oh man. So anyways, moving on from that, the fifth take here. Who wins the Central? It is close. You've got the Canes, the Lightning, and the Panthers all playing ridiculously well, and they're all just right there. It seems like it's going to come down to what happens when they play each other, honestly. Because
my money's on Tampa still. I like the Canes a lot.
Money's on,
but
I like the Canes.
It's like I don't think it's Florida. They can't with all their injuries right now. And
but Barkov's coming back Saturday or Sunday, and so is Hornquist.
Oh, are they both? Are they both confirmed though, or are they both just targeting that?
They're targeted. They're targeting that, which I mean means they're back.
It's still at least one more game they're going to miss, maybe 2.
Yeah, makes a difference.
It makes a difference
for that top spot. Yeah.
So I don't really know what to make of it yet. It's for Florida. It all depends on Bob.
Yeah,
for them to be able to compete like long term. They've gotten away with it for a while now, but I don't know if Bob doesn't become. He's been better lately. I'll give him that.
He's been much
and
better.
Canes got
finally he got some credit.
It's we can't discount the fact that the Canes have been with injury as well, with the lack of Trocheck and Carolina and Mrazek. All of them are coming back. Well, I don't know about Turbo actually, but Tampa, of course, doesn't have Kucherov, so everybody's kind of missing somebody. But my money's still on Tampa. I think they're such Tampa and Colorado. Tampa and Carolina are both pretty similar in depth, I think. But I think the edge that Tampa has is I trust Vasilevsky far more than any other goalie in the league, including anybody the Canes has. So that's where I'd kind of draw the line between the two of them. Okay, sixth take. This is going to be a long 10 takes, but I think we kind of expected that. The second I wrote vetoes as the thing, I was like, sorry, this is going to be a long episode. But Colorado and Donskoy, they are just watching them thrash, I mean, a poor third string and fourth string goalie, to be honest, but still thrash a defensively sound Arizona Coyote team for 9 goals on Wednesday night was pretty crazy. And considering they scored 5 of them or whatever it was in the first like 12 minutes or something, it was an insane game. However, I think the person to be looking at here is Donskoy more than anything. He hasn't, I don't know if he actually wound up on, he may have wound up in unsustainable once as Unsas High, obviously, which he still is, but he's gone from somebody that like I would be happy to be streaming at this point to somebody that like maybe he's a hold. And the thing that's changed is top power play. Simple as that. He's starting to take Kadri's spot on that top power play. And considering has he had the touch lately? Good Lord. We'll see how long it lasts. I think like they're going to ride that hot hand as long as they can. I do think he falls off at some point, but I would be happy to have him until that happens.
Yeah, I mean, he is just crushing it right now. I remember seeing it kind of start, and I was like, is he worth picking up? I was like, I don't know.
He was getting like 13 or 14 minutes a game when it started. It was like,
yeah,
how do
I
you
know.
defend this? It's Nick Schmaltz all over again.
I know. I looked at it and I was like, I can see a path to this being real, but I don't know. And
needs a lot of factors.
Really, so it's okay.
Those
Need a lot of factors.
all came
and the
up.
Factors.
Change, power play line change, and increased time on ice. Those are what you need.
The universe just aligned for him. What are you going to do? Seventh take here. Nedeljkovic was named Rookie of the Month. It is getting interesting over there. What are they going to do? There are some rumors about Reimer potentially getting moved, maybe going back to Toronto.
I've heard, and
I don't know.
I didn't look this up on Cap Friendly, but some of our patrons told us that Nedeljkovic needs to play something like 7 or 8 more games this season, or he will become a UFA instead of an RFA.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm not exactly sure how that works. It must be
that.
some sort of like contract obligation that the team has to give you a chance. But that is interesting, and it does make sense to move Reimer at that point. Nedeljkovic has shown that he's NHL ready. As best as a rookie can anyway. We're only looking at a handful of games, but he has not looked shaky. So why not? What is the upside of putting him in the AHL and keeping Reimer at this point? I mean, he's not getting any younger. He's already 25 or 26. That's the age you put somebody in the NHL for a goaltender, usually.
And the thing with him is, this is kind of what this was the whole reason they brought him up, and what they were excited to see was to see if he could prove that he's ready to be an NHL goaltender. I always assumed that if he did prove he could, they were going to keep him over Reimer. Much younger, could be a future starter or a 1A, 1B situation. So I do think that moving Reimer at this point makes a lot of sense.
They have to move Reimer, though. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what worries me is like, what do they do if they can't? They could waive him, but that's kind of crazy, I think. I don't think they want to lose him for nothing.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean,
Because if they don't, right? If they don't do that, they could put Nedeljkovic on taxi squad or send him to the AHL or whatever, and then bring him back up for playoffs. If they waive Reimer and lose him, and then Mrazek gets hurt again, it starts getting crazy pretty quick.
Yeah. The thing with Reimer, though, is that he does only have one more year left. So this is the last year.
That's perfect for them.
So if someone, it's perfect for them. And on top of that, but also I'm saying if they waive him, not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily want him next season. I think they want him for playoffs. I think that's the concerning thing.
I think they'll be able to move
nothing.
him.
That they don't really have.
I think they could move him.
I don't think they have like that black ace. You know what I mean?
But they can. I think they can retain salary.
No. I'm sure they can move him, but they still, even if they do, they need to get something serviceable. I assume they get a goalie back, a worse goalie.
Yeah, potentially, I could see that happening.
But if they waive him and he gets claimed, then it's like I don't know what they do.
Then they're in trouble
if somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
I think they're dead. Honestly, if Mrazek gets hurt again, they do that. It's Nedeljkovic all day long, and good Lord,
and
I just don't know.
Knows?
Speaking of Mrazek, they've moved him to the AHL for conditioning. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. He's been out for a while, but at the same time, like I'm hearing that he's targeting like the next Tampa game to come back and play. And what do you do, right? Like for the Canes right now, why bring him up right now? Why not let him sit in the AHL for a little bit, get his legs going again and try to work out whatever it is you're going to do with Reimer before the deadline and get those extra starts for Nedeljkovic that we just talked about. So I think them sending him to the AHL for conditioning makes a lot of sense instead of just bringing him up, dealing with that three-headed monster and trying to figure out what they're going to do with their taxi squad.
Agreed. By the way, the Hurricanes do have a player on the taxi squad that is a goaltender. It's Beck Warm. 21-year-old.
You see how we don't even recognize that name? That's not a good sign.
No, I have no clue who this person is.
I also feel like who you want for that possible backup is probably not 21 years old. But
Beck Warm has had very, very hot performances. A little bit above Warm. In the AHL, he played for the Chicago Wolves. He's had 6 games played, has a .202 goals against average, and a .944 save percentage. It's pretty good. Before that, he played in the WHL with the Edmonton Oil Kings. 15 games played, 2.29 goals against average, and a .915 save percentage. Not bad.
He's pretty good.
Warm Beck. Beck Warm. Very warm.
We'll see.
V Warm. Okay, my next bit here after the Mrazek bit. Oh, Ekblad. Broke my heart. Mm-hmm. He is out for the season. What do the Panthers do now? Do you think they make a move for a defenseman, or do they just stick it out with what they've got?
I don't know. There's a lot of rumors that they're going to go after Ekholm, which makes some sense.
Would make sense.
But, I would have to look at his cap, his contract rather, to see if I would agree with that, because I'm not sure they necessarily
they can retain.
Although, maybe it makes sense in general, because what are they? They're not taking Yandel back next season, so they will have an opening there. They've got the cap space.
Yeah.
Ekholm makes a lot of sense.
Ekholm's only 30. He's only 30. He's not that old.
I thought he was younger than that, but
really,
they've got they still have Yandel for. Wow, I didn't realize. I thought he was a UFA coming up, but no, they've got him for 2 more years. Oof.
Oh yeah.
Why with the PR at the beginning of the season? That's so weird. Such a weird move. But anyway, I do think that they move probably for some sort of defenseman. I don't know if it's offensive or not, because they still have Yandel, who, love him or hate him, he's one of the best that there is on the power play. So, but Ekholm does make sense for them, and I don't know that he has. I don't think that he's what they need in Nashville anymore. They've got Roman Josi, obviously, and then they have Dante Fabro coming up, who's playing better and better. So as far as offensive defensemen go. So makes some sense. All right. For my last bit here, I want to talk a little bit about what the power play means for defensemen. And I'll make this quicker anyway than the veto talk was. But I went up going into I wanted to see, because I've talked a few times about how I feel like it's impossible to consistently get above, not impossible, but it's unlikely that most defensemen get above half a point per game without having very solid power play numbers. So what I did was I looked, starting in 2017, going through the 2019-20 season, because it's finished. I looked at any players any defensemen that were above a half point per game pace, getting fewer than 25% of their points from the power play. So that essentially means that I'm looking for defensemen that either play power play 2 or don't play the power play. Anywhere, if they're getting more than 25% of their points from the power play, they're probably on a strong power play unit, even if it is a power play 2. So, and this kind of turns into players that you should be paying attention to when they get a shot on the power play versus players you should be picking up. So I went looking, and my goal was to find any player that did this 2 years in a row for some sort of consistency, right? So that means they got better than a 41-point pace with less than 25% of their points, or fewer than 25% of their points coming from the power play. 2 players did it. It was Charlie McAvoy and Seth Jones. I feel like both of those players kind of at least hit my brain the same way. They're always players that I feel like get drafted too early and wind up being quote unquote disappointments almost every season. Ekblad obviously did it once last season, and I feel like he kind of falls into the same situation. A lot of the names, I went to look through all the names that did it at least once. Ryan Ellis is the notable guy that I feel like has done it consistently. He didn't make the year-over-year thing because he barely missed out, but he's probably the most consistent point-getting defenseman that does not get a ton from power play. Other names on this list, Philip Hronek, brand new to the game, so he's going to be interesting if he starts getting actually power play time forever. Darnell Nurse, Ryan Pulock, Miro Heiskanen, that shouldn't be too surprising. Nate Schmidt did it once. Matthias Ekholm, just who we talked about here. Shea Weber, Alex Edler, I actually don't know how that happened. Ryan Murray, I also don't know how that one happened. Ryan McDonough, Mike Green, and then Ekblad. So those are the names of every single defenseman that's gotten more than half a point per game, with less than a quarter of them coming from the power play. And when I think about when I look at all those names, or at least the majority of them, some of them, Ryan McDonough, Mike Green, obviously, some of the older guys, Shea Weber, Edler, all those guys are kind of just aged out, and that sort of explains what's going on. They were good offensive defensemen, and they're starting to not be so good anymore as they get older. But a lot of the young guys, Philip Hronek, Darnell Nurse, Charlie McAvoy, Ryan Pulock, Miro Heiskanen, all these names, Seth Jones, even Ekholm at 30, Ekblad, of course. All these names are the players that I'm like, man, if they ever wound up in a position to get top power play numbers, they would be very good, because you could see them jumping from their 40, in these cases, they got between, 41 and 45 points usually on the season. You could see them jumping into like the 60s by just adding that extra boost from the power play. So I just don't want, when you're thinking about points from your defensemen, if they're not on power play 1, or at least not a very strong 1B type power play like they have in Toronto now, or they have in Montreal, if they're not in that situation, it's going to be hard for them to perform like they might be hyped up to perform. So this is more of a next season play than it is now. This is like the Rasmus Anderson type situation, the Josh Morrissey type situation. These are the types of players, especially, that you should be paying attention to if it looks like they're going to get extended looks on the power play. All those names I mentioned, if they show up on the top power play, yeah, you should be paying attention. Except for Seth Jones, because Columbus just can't. They just can't. Once they figure out the power play, Jones is going to be worth a lot, though, from offensive defenseman perspective. Until then, But yeah, that's rant. Not even a rant. That's Fantasy Hockey 101 number 2. Nick Letty. Somebody asked Nick Letty in our chat here. Whenever he produces, it's always on the power play. So. Yeah. I don't think he's a single time gotten above a half point per game without getting most of his points from the power play. Not most, but like a good chunk.
Yeah. I think a good reminder in the other direction of that is a guy like Morgan Riley, and Tyson Barrie. Both of them had the same thing happen to them, where they moved to power play 2 and all of a sudden became just useless.
Yeah.
Points wise, like they just didn't.
The
produce,
scariest thing is for a points forward defenseman to lose power play 1. Torrey Krug, yes, right? Like he didn't even lose it; he just lost timeshare. Petra Angelo is a decent example. He's doing okay. He actually might be one of the guys to get more than half points per game without getting the majority on the power play, but not being power play 1 is hurting him significantly.
It also matters a lot what team you're on. Like, it gets much tougher if you're on worse teams.
Yeah.
Like if you're on a Vegas, it's a little different.
The one player that comes to mind that was able to do it from power play 2 is Mikhail Serkichev. He didn't count because he actually got enough power play points even from power play 2 in Tampa, but he was very he was very close in every year. He was either just below half point per game or just above a quarter of his points coming from the power play. So he's another player that if he winds up being power play 1, they decide to move Hedman or whatever. Hedman gets hurt, right? Sergachev really gets interesting. Yeah.
Even our boy Pionk right now is sitting at still 33% of his points coming from the power play.
Yeah,
I mean, he hasn't done much recently. Still,
Yeah, they racked him up on that power play 2 for a while. Even Ehlers, right? Like Ehlers has a good power play point year, which is unusual for him, and Pionk benefited from it.
Yeah. Okay, well there you go. This time you got Brandon.
Yeah,
you got Brandon rants. Brandon put a hat on. Are you wearing a hat this time?
No hats.
I sent you my hat. Okay, so let's move into the weekend pickup suggestions. I have 2 from the Toronto Maple Leafs because they have 2 games this weekend, Friday and Sunday. Zach Hyman is my first one, along with Alex Galchenyuk. They're kind of doing... Zach Hyman is on the line with Austin Matthews, if I remember correctly.
Matthews
I was
and
just
Marner.
looking at this, right? The Matthews line. And then Galchenyuk is getting the second power play time, whereas Hyman's getting no power play time. So that's why I mentioned Galchenyuk, because Galchenyuk is on the other good line with Matthews. And
With Tavares.
he's getting second power play. So, sorry, with Tavares, yes. Galchenyuk's with Tavares, and then he also has second power play, so at least he's getting some power play exposure, whereas Hyman, you get that exposure to the Marner Matthews line, but you don't get any power play exposure. So,
I mean, they've been kind of going up and down with Hyman lately. I don't even know what to expect from power play, but they're doing the 1A, 1B thing, which if you have a good player...
They didn't last game.
Did they not?
They didn't. They did not last game. They changed it up.
Oh.
They went to just that top power play with Marner, Matthews, Tavares, and I forget who the fourth was. Oh, Nylander was the fourth, yeah.
Okay. So that's bad news for
Yes, they went back
Galchenyuk,
to
but I was under the impression
bad
that
news,
they were going to replace like a Thornton or something on one of the power play units with Galchenyuk and keep the split.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. Galchenyuk's only 5%
what I thought.
rostered, and he is getting power play looks now. He played like 40-something% of the power play last game, so I don't love him. He's Alex Galchenyuk, but I don't know. I mean, he certainly wants to make something for himself, and they're going to give him a shot, so you could do worse.
Yeah.
This weekend.
And it's
he's got
Toronto.
the off nights. So, so I had him to. Oh no, I got told how to say this name and I don't remember again. I think it's Janne Kuokkanen, and I do think it's Kuokkanen. This is one of the things that different play-by-play announcers are calling him different names, either Kuokkanen or Kuokkanen or whatever. But
Kuokkanen.
I heard Amanda Stein say Kuokkanen, and she's on the beat of the Devils, so I'm trusting her.
We're gonna trust Amanda Stein.
Yeah. So Janne Kuokkanen, 3% owned. He still winds up on here. He's still playing top power play. He's still very boring. Only really gets assists and occasionally, and he's a deep league play at 3%. And I'll also mention Paul Stasny at center left wing, 29%. He was also on the Monday episode because of Winnipeg having 4 off nights. Still has off nights, still has good deployment, still worth a pickup.
Yeah. My next one here, I really like Stasny. He was actually my favorite one for the weekend. My next one here, just kind of a flyer, is going to be Andrew Manjepani. He's getting some power play time. Not a lot, just a little bit of power play time. But the thing I do like is he's playing with Matthew Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm. Now, they're not getting a ton of minutes for some reason, but he is on that line. I like the Lindholm-Tkachuk line, and Manjepani is on it. So while that's kind of going on, sure. Just as a little warning, though, they are playing Brett Ritchie as well with Monahan and Gaudreau. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did some kind of swap there or something. So just pay attention to the lines and what's going on. But I don't hate Brett Ritchie either with Monahan and Gaudreau. So again, one of those kind of pick your poisons, see what's available. Depends on how deep your league is and what specifically you're looking for that you need.
Yeah, Ritchie's a big hitter too.
He is.
On here, I usually don't mention players that are above 50% owned, but this player's been getting dropped a lot, including being unsustainably low for us a little while ago. That's Connor Garland at left wing, right wing, 52%. He is back to normal, even against the defensive teams, picking up his shots, scoring his goals, getting slapped by helmets, all that kind of stuff. So his deployment's back to looking pretty solid. I'm back to being high on him. I feel like Garland and Fiala are very similar in that if their shots fall off, it's time to get a little worried. And we saw that with Garland, and they've come back. So happy again.
I did just drop him yesterday, though, to activate Trocheck. So, yeah, people are dropping him in leagues.
Yeah. Okay. I got 2 goalies as well for the back-to-backs. One option is Chris Drieger, who I'm surprised is still being held by 47% of GMs as he's not getting a ton of action. We're recording this Thursday during the day. He is going to play tonight against Detroit, which honestly I don't understand. If I'm totally honest, I don't get why they do that. Bob just had a great game against the same team, and you're playing Drieger at least once this weekend, so whatever. He's playing tonight, so that might make him harder to get because people are going to be hanging on to him, obviously. But the one I like more is McBackup, Curtis McElhinney, playing against Detroit, probably in the sludge match on Sunday. Doesn't get any better.
Go McBackup.
McBackup.
Epic. Oh, I can't believe he's only 5% owned, honestly.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, he doesn't get a lot of starts, but
That'd be higher.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, still surprising. I guess I don't know if I'm more surprised by the fact that 5% hold him or that only 5% hold him.
I was more surprised by the fact that 47% still had Drieger.
Yeah, that's surprising. I think that's just a testament to how much people believe Bob is just going to lose it.
That's probably true.
I think that's more what it is how much people think that Bob is just going to blow it and lose the net completely. I think that's what it is. Oh, man. Yep. Anyways, that is the show. Hope you have a great weekend. We will catch you for the week preview.
Yep. Thanks for listening.